Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bruce Erickson, and I'm the Policy and Communications Coordinator for the Minnesota Child Support Division, and I was the project lead for Minnesota's Digital Marketing Grant. I'm presenting here today some of the interventions we used for our Digital Marketing Grant and some of the findings and lessons learned. Before I get started, though, I'd like to thank Melody and Michelle and everyone at OCSS for managing this grant and helping all of us grantees share what we've done. I also like to thank the other grantees who generously shared their findings along the way to help the rest of us. To get started, I was just to kind of give an overview of the webinar today. I'm going to talk about just general high-level project information, and then dive into Minnesota's interventions, of which there were three: an information gathering, which sometimes I call market research, a digital marketing and electronic application, which I will explain a little bit more in detail. And third, a text messaging pilot that we ran. And finally, I will end the webinar with some lessons learned. Just some high-level general project information. Minnesota's child support program for this pilot, or for the digital marketing grant, we partnered with 12 pilot counties. There's an image of the state of Minnesota to the right on this slide with the 12 pilot counties highlighted in green. I will read them off quickly. They were Becker, Crow Wing, Koochiching, Pine, Dakota, Hennepin, Ramsey, Wright, Cottonwood, Jackson, Mower, Olmsted, and Scott counties. Two of the counties, Cottonwood and Jackson, if you guys did the math, it's actually 13, but Cottonwood and Jackson are merged, so they are one program. So we partnered with 12 pilot counties, and we thought it was a good representation of our participants from greater Minnesota, more rural areas, and the metropolitan area with Minneapolis and St. Paul, in the 7-county metro area with Hennepin and Dakota and Ramsey. They also varied in case size and case management styles, some of them doing case banking kind of activities or management styles, and others with more individual caseloads. We also collaborated with 2 state agencies. One is MINIT, also known as Minnesota Information Technology, and the other one is MAD, which is the Management Analysis and Development Division in our Minnesota Management and Budget Office. We contracted with 2 vendors. One was Contact Wireless for the texting platform, and the other one was Clarity Coverdale Fury, who helped us manage our digital marketing ads. Jumping right into the first intervention, it was the information gathering intervention that we wanted to start with. The goals of this intervention were to better understand Minnesota residents' awareness, understanding, and interest in the child support program. It's kind of the idea of a marketing funnel where you want to find out what people know, how much they're aware of your services, how much they even understand about the program, and then at the top of the marketing funnel and kind of working their way down. The other goal was to better understand the experiences and perspectives of current program participants to see what we could learn and somehow adjust or adapt to based on the findings. Just a little bit more detail on some of the information gathering. The first step of it was, like I said, the statewide survey results. We asked 5 questions, or we got questions in, it was more than 5 questions in the Minnesota State Survey, which is an annual survey done with the University of Minnesota Survey Center. And this part of the Minnesota child support section started when callers called Minnesotans and asked them about child support. They led up to it by saying the next questions are about child support, and defined it there, and which is money one parent pays to the child's other parent. And then they jumped right into the questions, and one of them was, are you aware that each Minnesota county has a government child support agency? And as you can see, I circled the 65% said yes, which was lower than what we were expecting or hoping, but of course we wanted it higher. But as the marketing grant went along, we were kind of trying to identify and even clarify what would be realistic goals. would it be realistic to get 75% or 85% of average Minnesotans to know that we exist and that they are, what our program is? But we haven't officially answered that, but it's 65% was a little lower than what we were expecting. Second question was, as far as you know, are county government child support services available only to people who receive public assistance or available to all county residents? Maybe similar to other child support programs across the country, but Minnesota sometimes anecdotally hears stories or statements like, well, I didn't sign up for services because I didn't think I was eligible, meaning that they think it's for public assistance, for folks who receive public assistance. I circled the 26% who said they didn't know. Again, to me, that number came across as being higher than expected. I was hoping that people would know that it's available to all county residents. However, this is kind of a mirror image of the previous question. So 26% is something that we'd like to lower and have people understand and know that their services are available. Then I'm skipping ahead here, but another question we asked, which is kind of the meat of the whole survey that we did with the University of Minnesota. The question is, if you were separated from the other parent of your child, how likely is it that you would apply for the county government child support services that we just asked you about? So what I didn't include here in the interest of time were some questions that we asked about, are you aware that the county government child support agencies establish paternity? Are you aware that they establish court orders? Are you aware that they enforce court orders? So we rattled off 3 or 4 services. So they were kind of had that in the back of their minds when they got to this question. But as you can see, or maybe for I circled the not likely was 46%, meaning 46% of the people who answered were not likely to sign up for services, which was, again, higher than we expected, which is part of the reason that we were doing this digital marketing grant work in the first place, is to find out why people who may be eligible for our services aren't signing up. Again, what's a realistic number? I think we would all like that to be the not likely number to be lower and the likely number to be higher. But we don't. This is at least kind of a benchmark. And if we are lucky enough to be able to do another follow-up survey with the average Minnesotans, we'll hopefully see if their answers change. As you recall, the other part of our information gathering intervention was to better understand participants in the program. And part of that was we contracted and partnered with Management Analysis and Development, also known as MAD, and they conducted 20 in-depth interviews of individual interviews of people who are participants in the program from one of those 12 pilot counties that I mentioned earlier. Some of the findings or some of the outcomes of that is that nearly all the parents who received support said the program benefited them and their families. I don't think that was necessarily probably a surprising result. And the other one wasn't the next bullet point. Paying parents are more often said there was not a benefit. I don't think that was a shocker either. But both parents did appreciate having an independent entity automatically collect, record, and send payments, which frankly is something that I think we took away as a service that we could promote a little bit more than we do some of the other services like paternity establishment. So that was just something we took to heart. And to the right of this slide, there are a couple of quotes that came from the interviews that I just wanted to highlight. That one parent said, it's been really positive. When I've called my worker, she's been good at getting back to me. Another one said, I understand the essence of child support and why it's needed. Although at times I feel the child support folks are more in tune with the person receiving it versus the person that needs to pay it. So that's kind of a synopsis of some of the interviews. Some of the challenges that the participants expressed during the interviews was that they feel like the process to sign up for services or apply was burdensome. There was a lack of understanding of how courts or the whole program really determined child support amounts. Sometimes they thought payment logistics were confusing or complicated. And they also thought it was difficult to update support amounts in their court order based, to reflect some of the changes in their life-changing events or changes of their income. Again, to the right of this slide, there are a couple of more quotes about the challenges. One says, when I go to the packet, I had to provide every document under the sun, all my utilities, all these pay stubs, which kind of goes to the whole burdensome process. And the bottom one says, from the get-go, there needs to be a cleaner process for explaining how they arrive at the figure that you pay. And just as a teaser here, that bottom quote and some of the other points that we heard from both the interviews and the surveys were what we used for some of our digital marketing materials later on. In addition to that, we did the participant survey, which reached a broader audience, and we wanted to see if that kind of confirmed what we found in the interviews. So we worked with MAD again, the Management Analysis and Development staff, and they sent the survey out. We kind of tried to stay out of it to let them manage it, so there was no conflict of interest. And they sent the survey by email to 9,800 participants, roughly. And they got 1,200, a little over 1,200 to respond, which was a pretty good response rate. We asked questions in the survey for their perceptions in categories like, well, what's your overall experience with the program? Some of the logistical questions about applications and payments. You can see payments on there too. Communications and demographic questions. The next 4 bullet points kind of summarize some of the findings. Again, receiving parents who receive support consistently rated their overall experience more positively than those who pay. Again, not surprising. Most parents agreed child support is an important program for ensuring the financial needs of children are met. But the kicker here is the second part of this bullet. While fewer said they trust the program to do what is in the best financial interest of their children. It's kind of it's a little bit of note that fewer trust the program. So trust is obviously an issue that we feel we have to deal with. Most parents agreed it's helpful when the program collects and records payments on their case. Again, that kind of validates what was said during the interview stage, that they like that service, and maybe we can do a better job of kind of promoting that service. And over half expressed interest in receiving email and text messaging communications. So that was kind of the a wrap up of the first intervention, our information gathering / market research. And we used a lot of that information, like I said, while we were moving into the second intervention of digital marketing ads. And the goals of doing the digital marketing ads were to increase traffic to the child support division's sign up for Minnesota Child Support Services webpage by up to 10%. And that was the page that we had. It's a landing page where people come to read a little bit more about the program and then initiate or sign up for services. It's there's a new electronic application, which is the second point here, to get them on that site that they can quickly sign up for services, more so than what they could with the old paper one. The second goal was to drive people to that newly developed electronic application that I just talked about, and I will talk about here in a few more minutes. And the third was to increase the number of non-public assistance applications by up to 5%, which is exactly what like I was saying before, one of the main points of this whole digital marketing grant project. So for the just kind of a breakdown of the digital marketing intervention at a high level, our target audience that we were trying to reach were single parents, ages 18 to 49. And based on some of the work we did with that, our digital marketing public relations firm, Clarity Coverdale Fury, there were groups that they kind of identify online as family support or single parent groups. And these were all kind of audience segments that we were trying to reach, again, within the 12 pilot counties that I talked about earlier. We used 3 90-day campaigns, and in those 90-day campaigns, we put advertisements on as display banner ads on websites that the target audience frequently visits. We use ads on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, and Spotify, although I'm not sure if you consider Spotify social media. And then we use paid search ads. So, for all 3 campaigns, we used a variation of themes and messages, but one theme, the themes are listed here with the 4 bullet points. One is stability. We shortened it to stability, which means, and the actual wording was child support is important. Children do better with support from both parents. And then because of COVID, we inserted another message that we didn't originally plan to do, which we called unexpected turn or U-turn. And it said, did life take an unexpected turn? Maybe child support can help. So ironically, we experienced an unexpected turn ourselves in the program. And so we created an additional theme and messages to go with it. The third one was just short and to the point. Need help? Child support, need help? Child support can help. Oh no, there's a typo there, so I apologize. It said need help and it says we can help. Or it said need child support, we can help. So I got that screwed up. Sorry about that. But it said need child support, we can help. And then the fourth one, the fourth bullet point there for themes and messages is what we used for our last 90-day campaign. When we decided to try videos exclusively for the last 90-day campaign, and we created 5 videos, and they had themes of like, why should I apply for child support services? What services are available? How do courts determine child support amounts? Again, that was kind of in response to some of the feedback we got from participants, like they don't understand how courts decide that. And then finally, how do I sign up for services? They were all very relatively short videos that we used for the ads. Breaking down the next couple slides are going to be just examples of the ads that we used. These two were for one is this is child support is important. That theme of stability shows looks an adult male hugging a child with an adult female in the background smiling. That kind of reinforces the message of children do better with support from both parents. The ad on the right, again, was in response to COVID, but did life take an unexpected turn with an adult female with a mask talking to a child with a mask. Let's see, the next slide is also more examples. The one on the left is need child support, we can help. And again, no image. We also tested that, see if there was any impact of image or no image. And then the one on the right is a screen cap of one of the videos I was talking about that says, why should I sign up for child support services? It shows an animated, we use animated videos, an animation of an adult female with a child holding a soccer ball. And again, we just wanted to include that as an example of some of the ads that we ran. Here's how they rendered on various, this slide shows how some of the display banners rendered. This is a slide of a display banner on Minneapolis's, Minnesota's newspaper of largest circulation called the Star Tribune, the Minneapolis Star Tribune. It's got the ad of did life take an unexpected turn? Maybe child support can help with an adult male helping a young child with their mask. The next slide is an example of smaller display banners. We used a variation in size. These were basically showing what they would look like on cell phones. The one on the left is just an adult and a child on a mountain of snow with masks. Again, that was for COVID, and we put it out during the colder part of the year when there's lots of snow in Minnesota, which is 10 months out of the year, joking. And then the one on the right is a smaller display banner in the lower part of the cell phone screen that says child support is important. Again, that stability message. And it has an image of a mom and a child sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. The last example here is examples of paid search ads that we had when people typed in words like child support services or child support help. One on the left says child support is important. And then the one on the right says, did life take an unexpected turn? Maybe child support can help. Then just anecdotally, before we launched our first 90-day campaign, Minnesota was able to develop an electronic application, and we launched it on February 1st, 2021. We partnered with our Minnesota information technology colleagues to create and develop it outside or separate from the grant. And like I said, we launched it before the campaign started, our first campaign started. But some key improvements of the electronic application is that It was shorter than the one we had before. That was a 16-page PDF that people could fill out maybe on their computer, or they'd either have, but they couldn't fill it out on their phone. It was not mobile friendly. And they'd either have to print it off, and then if they typed it up, they'd have to print it off and mail it in, or they could print it off and then handwrite in the information and then either mail it in or hand deliver it into the local county child support agency. We tried to balance the needs of the applicants in terms of what fields were required on the electronic application, but also give child support staff enough information so they can take the next step on the case. It was kind of that, trying to find that sweet spot. We tried to improve equity, and I will show that here in another slide or two. We included some information when we asked for information about race or ethnicity. We had some feedback saying, well, why are you asking for that? Why is that relevant to the child support process? Especially with increased emphasis, rightly so, on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion work. We wanted to make sure that that was clear to applicants. And then we included a question about safety concerns, which again, I have an example here in the next slide or two. So if people had, if applicants had concerns about their safety, they could express that, and then workers in the county could take appropriate next steps. Here's an image of the electronic application as it would render on your phone to the left on a cell phone, and then the one on the right is an example of the electronic application on a computer monitor. Here's the statement. This slide shows the statement that we used to incorporate some information about why we ask for various demographic information. It basically says we're asking for demographic information to make so we can improve the program, basically is what it says, and help us design and implement more effective and inclusive practices. So that was a new addition with the electronic application. And then here's the question that we asked about safety concerns, where it says Minnesota's child support program takes the safety of families receiving child support services seriously, and we can modify some of our processes to help with safety concerns, and the applicant can answer yes or no. And again, then that follows through to the worker, the county workers, for them to do follow-up and take the appropriate next steps. Now, just to quickly go over some of the results. From the first 90-day campaign, back to the goals that I referenced a few minutes ago, our web page traffic to that sign up for services, we averaged about 8,400 page views per month. The website actions, which is what I was commenting on earlier, that was driven by, we were hoping to have people, click on the ads and have them be attractive, where people would then go, and we used a variety of display ads, social media, and paid search. And a website action is basically the act of somebody clicking on the ad and then going to our sign up for services page, and then picking the next step of clicking on either the electronic application button, or if people still wanted to use the PDF versions, we would track that as well. So those are all captured as website actions. But as you can see here, the display ads, where did life take an unexpected turn, performed the best, so that message. In social media, it was the other one. Child support is important. So the stability theme on Facebook performed the best. Under the paid search banner, the top search terms that we tracked were when people typed in child support services. And at that point, for the first 90-day campaign, our non-public assistance applications were about not quite 1,400, not quite 1,400 applications. For the second 90-day campaign, as you can see, our web page traffic went up. Oh, no, actually, sorry, it went down. This one went down 6,588 page views, so not quite 6,600. So the first 90-day campaign, we had more web page traffic, but as then we did in the second 90-day campaign, but ironically, our NPA applications keep going up. For the specific website actions that I was talking about, display ads on this 90-day campaign, child support is important, so the stability theme and the unexpected term theme, they performed about the same. So again, why is that different than the first 90-day campaign? I don't really know. But on social media, the new message that we added, need child support, we can help, that performed the best. it performed better than the child support is important and the unexpected turn messaging. So again, different results for different platforms. But the paid search was consistent. The child support services still remained the top search term. And as I mentioned earlier, our application totals were up. So second 90-day campaign, we kind of built on the progress of the first 90-day campaign and kept growing. Third 90-day campaign, like I said, we kind of took a pivot and we produced 5 animated videos that were used for the ads. And traffic, as you can see, I should probably can tell you the names of the videos or the topics of the videos quick. I'll just cover that quickly. One was, why should I sign up for services, for child support services? And we made variations of one version that had a female signing up for services and another version where a male signed up for services. We had another, so that we had a third video was what child support services, or what services does the Minnesota Child Support Program offer? We provided a little clarity and explanation for what services we provide, and frankly, what services we don't provide. We also, the fourth video was how do Minnesota courts determine child support amounts? And we clarified what courts consider and how they use the guidelines in Minnesota statute when they decide on child support amounts. And part of that video, that was the longest video of the 5. And part of it, we used a hypothetical example of parents and 2 children, and we had their incomes and laid that out in the 2-minute and 12-second video or something close to that. And again, part of the reason we created that video is based on feedback from participants and even from Minnesota residents, where they don't totally understand how child support amounts are determined by the courts. And finally, we had a video that says, how do I sign up for services, which was just 30 seconds long, and it showed people how to go to that electronic application on our signing up for services page. So that kind of lays out the third 90-day campaign, but the data here, like I said, the web page views were down again, but for website actions, the video that performed the best was why should I sign up for child support? The one with the female applicant. On social media, it was neither one. It was different, and it was what services does Minnesota's program offer? Paid search was slightly different this time too, where we had the term child support help came up as the top term. But overall, as you can see, our MPA applications continue to climb. So we were at almost 1,682. So that trend was nice to see. Overall, comparing the 3 90-day campaigns, the headline is really that the goals were met despite mixed outcomes and messages from the messages in the platforms. Like I said, sometimes certain messages resonated better on display banners than they did on social media, and sometimes the reverse happens. So despite those mixed outcomes with the messages in the platforms, we met the overall goals. Our ads, again, the other goal was our ads did seem to drive people to take actions, those website actions where they were clicking on either the electronic application, or they were visiting the page, or they were clicking on the PDF version of the application in case they didn't want to fill it out online. As you recall, I think if you recall earlier, I said one of our goals was to increase traffic to our web page by 10%. Ours was up nearly 300% from when comparing when the ads were running versus when the ads were not running, on average per month. So that's a significant increase. But granted, it's probably not surprising given how much money we spent on the ads. And overall, the big one kind of buried the lead here, but our average number of monthly NPA applications over the whole last couple of years are up 13.5%. So that's the average monthly NPA applications. So it's more than what we were expecting, 5%. Oops, sorry, I jumped around here a little bit. Sorry about that. Next slide is the text messaging intervention. So this is the third and final intervention. And this was mainly to try to improve communications with participants in the program. We had 4 goals that were very program specific to see if text messaging would help us increase the percentage of current monthly child support paid in the number of payments made towards past due support by parents who either don't pay. So this is kind of an interesting distinction. They don't pay at all. They haven't been paying, or they're paying by they're not paying by income withholding. We decided to reach out to parents who are either paying by check or going to Pay Near Me or MoneyGram. So either they're not paying at all, or the way they are paying is not through income withholding, which we thought, why send them a text message if they're making payments through income withholding? And it was kind of pointless, we thought. We also wanted to increase the number of parents registered on our portal. It's called Minnesota Child Support Online, but it's a way for parents to get case information, and that way, if they're able to log in, they don't need to necessarily call the counties or our help desk for information. We wanted to decrease the amount of money that we label abandoned funds. It's when people have child support on stored value cards with our partner US Bank, and sometimes parents either lose the card, or they forget they had the card, or they forget that there's money on the card, or they haven't made a transaction. So we wanted to decrease that. And then we want to decrease the number of driver's license suspended for people who have fallen behind on paying support. We wanted to see if we interacted with them by text, if we could decrease the numbers of those. Again, in general, some high level stuff before I talk about the various specific program, results. Right off the bat, we had an unexpected barrier, or whatever we're going to call it, but our lawyers in the department, our general counsel's office, said that we needed to get our participants permission to text them before we could even start. So that forced our numbers to be a lot lower than what we were expecting. We worked hard to get people to sign up, but based on our lawyer's interpretation of that Telephone Consumer Protection Act, we took a more conservative approach. To get people to sign up, we emailed participants in the 12 pilot counties several times. I don't remember how many times, but probably at least 4. And, we eventually got it was like 4,980 people signed up. So we had nearly 5,000 participants when they got the email from us or heard about it from county staff or however other means that we used to get people to know about it, signed up. As part of the contract too, we had 250 accounts for pilot county staff to do 2-way texting with participants about any topic, including the ones I mentioned earlier. And then a one-way account for us at the Child Support Division to send texts about the topic goals that I mentioned earlier, the payment reminders, the MCSO registrations, all that stuff. And like I mentioned before, the county staff were free to text about other topics. And I think we sent 1 or 2 text messages out about cost of living adjustments, the COLAs. But I know county staff sent out appointment reminder text messages saying, hey, don't forget you have a court date on whatever date. And texts about income withholding. We would hear anecdotal stories where participants who had signed up for texting would contact their worker and say, hey, I just got a new job. Here's my new job. Please send out the income withholding papers. So there was, and they would send out county specific messages about events and stuff like that. But we didn't track those as part of it. That was just kind of a fringe benefit. Here's the slide with a couple examples of the text messages that we would send. Again, the top one is the payment reminder one, where we'd say, hey, this is Minnesota's child support. Your child support is due before the end of the month. Please allow some time to process. The bottom one is the one counties would send out. So at the state level, we didn't send these out. These were case specific. And one of our pilot counties, let's say it's Ramsey County Child Support, your license is suspended because of past due support. Please call us to learn how to reinstate it. So I just wanted to include a couple of examples. Here are the results at a super high level. The payment reminder texts, we got good results. But as you can see, the parents who received the text paid a higher percentage of current support, as high as 57.8% compared to 9.5%. Those statistics came from probably I can't remember the month, but it was the month with the highest amount of current paid. So I just wanted to highlight one of them. But we wanted to remember that we were texting to people who weren't paying at all, or they were not paying by income withholding, meaning that they could have paid by check or other means. And again, our sample size was pretty small. So I'm glad to see the results that we got. So I think it did have an impact. But it would be interesting to see if we're able to get a higher percentage of our participants to sign up, what the results would be. Minnesota Child Support Online, the parents who received text messages were more likely to register for the portal. Is again 0.79% compared to 0.14. It's higher, but it's still not fantastic. Again, whether or not these are people who aren't registered and maybe they don't know about it. Again, it's in a very small sample size. We'd like to get see what happens with a larger sample size. The unclaimed funds that I mentioned earlier, the stored value cards. This was better, where parents who received texts were more likely to go in to use the funds and make a transaction as high as 30.3% compared to 6.46%. So that was significant. And the timing of when we would send the text messages about the unclaimed funds mattered too. And again, with a higher sample size, it'd be interesting. And we sent all these text messages out once a month, so we didn't bombard them. And then the counties would send the driver's license suspension texts during the last week of the month. And the timing of when we sent these out each month mattered because of how our data was updated in our case management system. But the driver's license suspension texts, the parents who received them had a higher rate of reinstatements. So that was good. As you can see, the 49.2% compared to 39.3%. And anecdotally, we wanted to see and find out how the people who did sign up for the texting pilot, the texting intervention, what they thought about it, what they thought about their experience. So at the end, we sent them a survey, and 81% said they wanted the child support program to continue to communicate with them by text in the future. So we're working on trying to, for lack of a better word, operationalize texting. We're still working on some of the legal and technical ramifications, but we're making progress. In general, the lessons that we learned for all three interventions, the information gathering, we need to continue to do market research and gather information from both potential participants, like single parents who aren't signed up for the program, and those who are in the program, and then make adjustments based on the results. Like I was saying, that we made some of our ads we adjusted some of our ads and our messaging based on some of the feedback we got from the surveys and the interviews. Another big lesson learned is that the digital ads marketing can work. And even our paid search ads were, I think, a pretty good return on investment. However, at the same time, our electronic application, the fact that we developed that, I think also had a big impact on our overall average monthly increase in non-public assistance applications, because we made it easier for people to sign up. We made it easier for people to interact. And I think the child support program as a whole, if we can make it easier for people to give us the information we need, the better we're gonna perform the better we're gonna be able to help folks and families. And for texting, again, overall, it seemed to have a positive impact, but because of the small sample size, with our requirement in Minnesota to get permissions before we could even start texting, it's hard to really gauge impact at a broader level. Now, that being said, the program needs to use tools like texting that people that we serve are using in everyday life, kind of that meeting people where they're at. And that reinforces the statistic I showed in the previous slide that 81% want us to communicate with them by text in the future. So with that, that's kind of Minnesota's digital marketing grant in a nutshell. I want to thank OCSS, Melody, Michelle, and my fellow grantees for partnering and for helping with. It's been a valuable experience and very informative. If people want to reach out, my contact information is at the bottom of this slide. And with that, I will thank you and wish you all well. Thanks.